I just came from a reception for the birthday party for a man who just turned 90 years old, and there were friends of his that were there, and one person was 10 years younger than he, and one 10 years older. 80, 90, 100. That was quite a deal. So I wanted to talk to you today about President Trump's new establishment of the Faith Office in the White House, and he has set the leader of that to be the head of that to be Paula White, who is the televangelist. She's known for the prosperity gospel and speaking in tongues, and a major grifter. It's hit lots of news reports and investigations. The way that she's kind of siphoned off huge amounts of money from her flock, net worth of $5 million, lives in extravagance all the time. So the reason she's in that position is because she's been a Trump supporter forever, and she makes lots of statements that if you're defying Donald Trump, you're defying God. That they're one and the same, actually. And so you can see why Trump would nominate her for that position. Now, it's not like presidents haven't had faith leaders in the White House before. Of course they have. I mean, Billy Graham was known for that for years and years in many presidencies, and he would be a spiritual director for many a president. He was kind of America's chaplain for a long time. And then after kind of that time period, different presidents would establish different kind of councils or committees of faith leaders to bring counsel to the president or represent views. But normally it was a pretty diverse group. Roman Catholics and every stripe of Protestant, and Jews, and Hindus, Buddhists, and others. This is very different than that. This is a gathering together of what would be the president's anointed bishop, kind of the high priestess of the president, and it exemplifies Christian nationalism in the extremis. Basically, Christian nationalism is religion that has folded into the political ideology and system and reinforces that leader and that movement with no questions asked. Just kind of accepts it regardless. And in turn, the regime then is entwined with that religious group. Now, for Trump, who's not a religious person, doesn't know anything about the Bible, doesn't know anything about faith, he basically just receives his information from people and he passes it on. If they want, if the Christian nationalists want something, he goes after it. He makes it possible. And that's what this is. He's playing to them for their votes, right? Yeah, for power. So it's a kind of mutual power exchange. The religious folks on that side of the aisle get close to the levers of power, and then the president uses them and their constituency to keep him in power. There's this kind of, I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine. Well, one of the statements that came out by Trump, of course, was that he was going to, this was a presidential order, that he was going to establish a kind of entity that would examine anywhere that there was anti-Christian bias in government. Anti-Christian bias. Well, what's that mean? It's not anti-religious bias as in against persons of all faiths. It's anti-Christian bias, and in this case, we know what that code language means. It is very conservative evangelical bias that would keep them from having what they want, right? And that's interesting because that whole movement has often, strangely enough, defined themselves as the victims. We're the persecuted ones. And why are they persecuted? It's not like, around the world, minority religious groups of many kinds are persecuted by majority groups. For political or religious reasons, and Christians have been that, and also have every other body. But that's not what this is. This is not, Christians drug into the Roman Colosseum and ravaged by the lions, right? Because they wouldn't declare fealty to Caesar. That's not what this is. These Christians feel like they're victims when they can't have what they want, or whatever it is. Then they're being persecuted because they can't dominate. And that's the goal of the Christian nationalists, is to establish control over every aspect of society, the so-called 7 mountains approach, the 7 facets of society. They would dominate all those and control all those. Some states have gone so far as to say they're a Christian nationalist state. And so they feel persecuted. Or, in Trump's language, there's an anti-Christian bias there. Well, the bias is people don't want to do what they're doing. They don't want to have their laws. So you all who are familiar with, say, Islam, know that there are many societies in Islamic societies that follow Sharia law. And Sharia law is basically taking the tenets of Islam, as known in the Quran, and applying them socially so that it becomes the law of the land. In a sense, the Christian nationalists want to create a Christian Sharia law, in which all of those tenets in their interpretation of the faith becomes the law of the land. Everyone else has to abide by them, this slice of Christianity. And since they're close to this autocracy, they become this one singular voice. So what they're doing is they're establishing a theocracy. Now, of course, this is absolutely anathema to the First Amendment. The First Amendment, which guarantees religious freedom for all people, not just some, and the non-establishment clause. The government shall not establish any religion as the religion of the realm. So, if it's a public institution, if it's governmentally supported, it shall not establish a religion as a part of that. This just kind of flies in the face of all that. He's going to establish Christian. There's going to be an anti-biasing for Christians, and we know for one slice of Christians. So this rising Christian nationalism is intertwined with the far right and oligarchy and working class kind of Christian nationalists, which have reinterpreted the Christian faith to be something other than it is. So I think one of the fascinating trends now is that those movements, those Christian nationalist movements that you talk to about Jesus have problems with him. Problems with Jesus and what he taught. So it's a real question. Can you have Christianity without Jesus? When you bring up something that Jesus taught or what he actually said or his life example, those Christian nationalists have real problems with it. Like, Paula White, she doesn't want to hear anything about what Jesus said about greed and material possessions. She just has a prosperity gospel, but she doesn't want to hear that. And a lot of those Christian nationalists don't want to hear what Jesus had to say about violence, because they feel like violence is legitimate because God is establishing this world order, this kingdom on earth, and they are his vanguard, and anything that gets in the way of it, well, that justifies use of force if necessary. It's really an ethic of crusade, isn't it? Basically, the crusaders can go forth with the sword and the cross and slash and burn, and that violence is legitimated in their understanding. It's a crusader's orientation. So that's what you have with Christian nationalism, which is a domination system that uses Sharia law. It cozies up to the autocrat, and the autocrat borrows on the moral sense of those Christian nationalists that legitimate him. So if you tuned in to the National Prayer Breakfast, you heard President Trump opining about, bringing religion back. Well, which religion is he talking about? It's not any other religion other than Christianity. And it's really not just any Christianity. It's one form of Christianity. Bringing that back establishing that. And he said, those people are going to be really happy. And the people in that room, which is pretty much Christian nationalists at prayer, were happy. The oligarchs in the room, the multimillionaires in the room, really happy. He's going to benefit them. It may not have much to do with Jesus, but it's sure going to get some traction. At that prayer breakfast, he talked about, how people are going to be delighted by, bringing religion back, and he brought up some very interesting things. He talked about, first of all, he appealed to miracles, and the miracle is that he dodged the sniper's bullet. That's the first miracle. And it was, the way he put it was, the moment before the sniper took the shot, I turned to look at my chart, my favorite chart on immigration and everything we're doing with immigration. And by turning to that chart, the bullet whizzed past me. It was in the moment in which I regarded the chart. You see how he's using a miracle to endorse, say, their policies about mass deportations and how they do it and cruelty and all that. This must be religiously endorsed, right? This must be God's will. It spared him. And of course, as he said before, since it spared me, that means that God wants me to do this thing. And Paula White would say, he's absolutely right. Get in the way of Trump, you're getting in the way of God. So he was spared by this great miracle to be about this great work. Of course, other martyrs of virtue haven't been spared, have they? Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. and many others, that they were martyred, and they were people of virtue. Trump is not a person of virtue, but he was spared for some great purpose. So he says, right? The other thing that he brought up at the National Prayer Breakfast was he was appealing to, the good old religion. We've always been there. He assumed that Americans have been religious all the way back to the founding. We were very sparsely populated in terms of religious activity in the founding in those early days. Much fewer practicing Christians then than now. But they kind of harken back to, the golden age when we were religious, right? And strangely enough, he brought up as a kind of an icon, Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, see, our founders, our hardy founders, our devout founders that rested their laurels on Christianity, Well, anybody who knows anything knows that Thomas Jefferson was a nonconformist when it came. He was no Orthodox Christian. He was, pretty much Unitarian. He was not Trinitarian. He certainly, with Jesus was a prophet and a moral teacher, but not a supernatural son of God. And he had an understanding. He was a deist, and so he had an understanding of God as the clockmaker. I mean, basically, the creator of the universe wound up everything and then let it run, but according to its own principles, right? Don't intervene. He's non-interventionist. There's no place for the supernatural in this system. And so you all know about Jefferson's Bible, right? The Jefferson Bible. So he took a pair of scissors to a Bible and he cut out all of the miracles. He cut out all the supernatural material. Jesus walking on the water and myriads of other texts. And then what's left basically is a collection of moral teachings, ethical teachings. That, Jefferson would say, is valuable because the universe has been created in such a way that it's a moral universe with moral principles, and one has to, subscribe and follow those. So if the people at that National Prayer Breakfast, as Trump lifted up this example of the golden age of spirituality, knew who Jefferson was, they would be astounded that they couldn't subscribe to anything about him, right? So those are the kind of things that are happening right now. Setting Christian nationalism in its place, unfolding that whole project, as pretty well enumerated in Project 2025, into the public politic, right? Making it the law of the land, making it policy, defining what's what, defining gender, defining marriage, all of this is being done as the product of this great Christian nationalism. And Paula White is the exemplar of that. For people who want to regard the First Amendment, religious freedom, to practice whatever or none at all, and to not establish any one religion as the religion of the realm, this is a time for protest. For those of us who are practitioners and Christians, but not Christian nationalists, it is a time for us to do the heavy lifting. It is time for us to call out that this is a twisted form of Christianity. This is a distortion. This is a heresy. This is a modern heresy. And to defy it and to speak against it and to lift up the actual teachings of Jesus, and not to just have Jesus as some kind of mascot that you use to project all your own ideology on, to create a Jesus in our own image, a Rambo Jesus in our own image or something like that. No, but to defy it and to speak differently. Everyone can talk about the separation of that form of church from state, and then Christians on the other side of that Christian nationalist aisle can defy that. And it's a very important thing to do. If we stand silent, if we don't push back, they will roll over everyone. They will take as much as we will give them. And we must not. And so, those are my thoughts for the day. And I hope that you have a good rest of your Saturday and you enjoy everything about it. And be strong. Be strong and do not be afraid. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.